Alrighty. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Rocio Rodarte, and I'm an Associate Program Director at Code for America. You'll also get to hear from a few other speakers in a little bit. So we are here today to talk about our work on the Arizona Integrated Benefits Form. We are particularly excited to highlight our experience working with eligibility workers, also known as caseworkers, in this process, and also bringing in the voice of frontline staff into this experience in this presentation. Next slide. So before we get started, I wanted to share a very quick overview of what you can expect during the session. First, we want to share more about our project and process working with Arizona. We want to showcase what our collaboration working with eligibility workers look like. Then you'll get to hear directly from two Arizona eligibility workers, Carla and Rosa. We'll wrap up by sharing some quick learning lessons and form design principles. And then finally, we'll have some time for Q&A at the end, but we do encourage you to ask questions throughout. As you know, there's a Q&A box in the chat, so please feel free to ask your questions throughout. And we'll do our best to answer them as quickly as we go, or if not, get to them at the end. Next slide, please. So to get started, so last year, Code for America partnered with the Arizona Department of Economic Security to co-design a new application for 5 different programs: SNAP, TANF, Medicaid, Childcare Assistance, and LIHEAP. This was a deep year-long collaboration with our partners. We're so grateful to Arizona for allowing us to partner on this work. While we concluded our partnership over the summer, Arizona is now working on implementation as part of their broader modernization efforts. Next slide, please. So as part of this work, there were 3 major foundations that we prioritize in the design of this application. Client experience, making sure that we led with a client voice, designing an application that would be accessible and readable to clients filling this out. There was also a program policy component, making sure we were asking the right questions for program eligibility, streamlining and avoiding redundancy wherever possible. And eligibility workers, making sure that our new application could improve the lives of eligibility workers. So today we'll be zooming in on this pillar. Next slide, please. So just to give you a little high-level overview of our process and what this looked like. So we conducted an overall question review of the various applications for the 5 different programs, which did include a policy review to making sure we were asking the right questions to determine eligibility. Designers worked on the content design, so the text of the application. We have in both English and Spanish, so we did do this in 2 different languages, we're proud to say, while simultaneously also creating wireframes so they could be used for implementation down the line. We checked in with clients to make sure we were headed in the right direction by testing through prototype links. And then also, again, we did check in with eligibility workers to make sure we were making their lives easier in this process. I do want to stress that this process was not necessarily conducted in a linear sequential order. As you see it here, these are mostly steps that we wanted to highlight for the different milestones we achieved in this process. There was obviously a lot of iteration, a lot of improvements on the text, the content design, the wireframes as we went through these different milestones. So just wanted to share a little bit of that. And then again, our focus today will be on the eligibility worker validation piece. Next slide, please. And finally, just to share really quickly, because I suspect many of us are form and data nerds, just wanted to give you some high-level numbers of our process and our work in this. So as you know, we had 5 integrated programs, 5 programs that we integrated into this application. This represented 9 different application sections. Our designers created 379 wireframe screens, and we had a total of 727 application questions, which sounds like a lot, but again, keep in mind that this was the totality of the questions that represented some obscure scenarios, as many user cases as possible. So an applicant would definitely likely experience way fewer than that. So with that, I will pass it over to my colleague, Sharon.
Right. Hi, everyone. So nice to see so many of you here from across the country, including Arizona. My name is Sharon Bautista, and I am the Director of Qualitative Research at Code for America. And I'm going to take you through in a little bit more detail what it looked like for us to co-design and evaluate the application that we were working on as it was in progress then with eligibility staff specialists. So our overall approach with eligibility workers workers. Again, looks linear on this slide, but we all know from our day-to-day work that processes are never linear, so this approach was definitely iterative. If you look all the way to the left, we've very much started with kind of what we wanted to learn with eligibility workers. We know that their time, maybe more than any other group, is very limited. So, as a researcher, we always set research goals, define our research questions, but I think it's more important than ever when working with a group of partners who have such limited availability and time. And so once we aligned on what we wanted to learn from this round of research, which was really to understand the extent to which the application as it existed at that point, so a work in progress, the extent to which it fit into eligibility workers' workflows, so their day-to-day ways of processing cases or working cases. And specifically, we wanted to get their input on kind of that content design or the wording of the questions. So with that goal in mind, we then started to ask ourselves which client profiles or which types of clients were most important for us to understand from eligibility workers' perspectives. So, for example, which variations of household makeup, maybe types of income, different types of identities kind of presented the most complexity and risk that we wanted to talk to eligibility workers about. So we ended up developing 5 different client profiles based on what we had learned up to that point in the project about the highest risk parts of the application. So we had to then figure out basically we knew the types of clients we wanted to understand better. We had some questions for eligibility workers, but how exactly would we kind of start that conversation with eligibility staff? And so we ended up finding a solution via ChatGPT, which I'll explain in a minute. But we proceeded to develop an interview guide. We tried it out with a few eligibility staff to start. We kind of made improvements to it. And then we ended up conducting interviews with 8 eligibility workers. And then we took a close look at kind of what we heard in those interviews. We analyzed the recordings and notes and ended up developing a set of both short and longer term recommendations for us to talk over with and discuss with the Department of Economic Security. So to give you a little bit of a closer look on the screen, what I'm sharing is an example of the instructions that we shared with eligibility workers in advance of the interviews I just described. So the key things to take away from kind of what this slide is showing is that we tried to make the instructions as simple as possible. Again, just knowing how busy eligibility workers are and how much information they have to hold in their heads given their roles and responsibilities. You'll see in these instructions that we asked eligibility workers to imagine that the document that we sent them in advance of the interviews was a completed integrated benefits application. So in reality, the application, we were still working on the design of it, but we, again, gave them this scenario for the purposes of our conversation. The instructions also included in advance the 3 main questions we wanted to discuss for eligibility workers, again, to consider in terms of kind of what information they saw or noticed in the new application, if they saw anything that might be missing that they considered really critical to the way they work cases, and anything else really that might make this application something kind of more valuable and helpful given what they do on a day-to-day basis. So with these instructions, so that's like the top part here of the instructions that we shared. We also gave eligibility workers just a little bit of high level detail about kind of the client profile we would be discussing. So in this example that you see on the screen, we let eligibility workers know that you're looking at an application for someone who is interested in SNAP and childcare, who's a US citizen with one other child, also living with household members with undocumented status who are doing different kinds of gig work. Um, so every eligibility worker that we interviewed kind of had a different profile to discuss. And again, we arrived at these profiles based on both past policy reviews with Arizona policy experts, policy staff from Code for America, and also past research that we had done with clients. So people in Arizona interested in benefits and kind of the input that we got from them. All right, so I mentioned that we gave eligibility workers for these interviews a document that would help kind of spur discussion. So this is where ChatGPT comes in. So in planning for these interviews, we knew that we wanted to show eligibility workers the new application. But we wanted them to be focused more on kind of the wording of the questions rather than kind of to be distracted by the colors of the page or kind of the broader design. And, like many of all the things that we work on here at FormFest, we had a very tight timeline. Our team up to this point had been mostly working in the design tool Figma to create wireframes. And so we weren't really sure how to make something easy and simple enough with the time that we have that we could use in these interviews. And so we actually posed our conundrum, like what we were trying to do, like the resources we had to ChatGPT, essentially asking how we could create a simplified version of the application in progress from the files and like documents we already had. And so ChatGPT's guidance was that we could create a script that would let us take the application questions, like just the words from the design files that we had, get those into a spreadsheet, and then finally be able to pull those questions from the spreadsheet into a very simple Google Doc that literally just listed the questions in the application and had boxes where we could fill in details that reflected those client profiles that I mentioned. So, this is far from like a cutting edge use of AI, maybe the most basic use of AI. But I wanted to call it out as a reminder that while all of the AI tools out there today can automate many types of work, that for the types of work we do, where we're constantly problem solving, it can also be used for that kind of basic problem solving or to source suggestions for alternative ways to approach a problem when fuller automation maybe isn't possible or even desired or the right thing to do. All right, so just to give you a quick view, this is the Google Doc that I was describing that we used in the interview. So we sent these to eligibility workers at least a week in advance of our conversation. You'll see on the left, they're basically all the sections of the application, and on the right in the main section of the page are again in just a very kind of basic type, the questions of the application, and then the boxes for the answers that match the client profiles. All right. So I wanted to take a moment to share kind of some of the things we learned from partnering with eligibility workers directly. So things that contributed, I believe, to our success. And in a moment, I'll talk about like what we actually learned about the application design from these sessions. But in some ways, I think like these learnings are perhaps even more important because this is the kind of collaboration that can apply to all sorts of projects, not just an integrated benefits application form. So first thing, starting at the top left there, we worked together with the Department of Economic Security to create a research plan, again, with a clear goal that outlined very specific, expectations, like what we were asking of eligibility workers, what time commitment would look like. And then moving on to the second point here, really worked closely with our executive sponsor from the Department of Economic Security to communicate with leadership and get their support for recruiting eligibility workers, again, who are so busy and with such limited time that they were essential partners for us being able to collaborate in this way. Third, even though our timeline was tight, we made sure to leave time again to pilot or try out the interview guides we developed, just to check our assumptions, make sure that our questions were comprehensible. When it came closer to the time for interviews, this is a common practice in research, but again, so important when you're working with groups like eligibility workers that just have so much on their plates, is we sent multiple reminders and again, tried to reassure in very simple terms, what the sessions would look like, what, time commitment it would be. I previewed the questions that kind of form the foundation of the interviews. We on purpose kept these, very loosely structured. So with the three questions that I shared, leaving lots of room for eligibility workers to kind of steer us in the directions that made the most sense. And then, maybe most importantly, is to make sure that everyone involved in this research, including the eligibility workers, kind of understood what would be done with the things that we were learning. All right, and just to wrap up before kind of we hear from our experts, Rosa and Carla, some of the things that we learned about the actual application design, so what we were evaluating. So on the one hand, we did learn some things about the wording of the questions. So remember that was kind of, our key goal. So for those of you who work on programs like this, questions about expenses, utilities, income, are always hard. So, an example, we had a question that originally read, do you rent your home? And one of the things that eligibility workers told us was that in their experience, that clients often think of the word home related to ownership. So the fact that we were asking a renting question with the word home could potentially make clients confused about whether we're actually asking about home ownership or renting an apartment or something like that. So there were changes like that, which were like very concrete and actionable that we worked with DES to implement. But what you'll see in the highlighted boxes to the right here is that actually the majority of what we heard from eligibility workers was, they can adapt to anything. They adapt to policy changes all the time, process changes. But the things that they, asked for were really for us to advocate, for the types of kind of learning and support that they need when change happens. So kind of really key takeaways related to change management. So, for example, hearing directly from leadership about changes that are coming, we heard multiple times as being just really valuable to kind of hear from the source about things that would affect eligibility workers day to day. Making sure that eligibility workers have time to explore any changes that might be rolling out. So, if there's a change to an application or a new application, we also interesting, on this day of all of us kind of doing trainings online through platforms like Zoom, that those can serve a need for sure, but that it's also very easy to multitask during online training. So for any big changes, recognizing that there is still a lot of value and opportunity for in-person training when it makes sense. And then finally, we learned a lot about kind of different tools, some of them very low tech, that can support eligibility workers in navigating change. So, the value, for example, of cheat sheets. So, literal, like kind of documents that give tips to eligibility workers on how to navigate a change that has just rolled out, can be a very kind of low effort, low cost, high reward tool that can support, again, change management. So, without further ado, we have Rosa and Carla here from the Department of Economic Security, and they're going to talk through some examples of kind of what, kind of some of the broader themes that we've been describing so far. So, with that, I'll pass things over to Rosa. We'll make sure Rosa's audio is working. It looks like Rosa, you might still be muted. All right. We'll give it a moment. I think while we figure out Rosa's audio issues, maybe we can switch to Carla if you don't mind. And Carla, if you want to talk through some examples first, and then we can switch back.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sharon. Okay, so I'll go ahead and start. Good morning, everyone. My name is Carla. I'm an eligibility specialist for the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, and I'm currently located in Maricopa County. So today I'm going to be speaking about basically the impact of working with Code for America. So, through this process, it has given me the opportunity to take a big step back and reflect, not just on how rewarding this job has been, but also on the challenges and lessons that I faced. So, for instance, how Sharon touched base on how important it is for clear wording of income, expenses, and utility questions that can ensure a smooth processing for both the specialist and the applicant. I have spoken to enough applicants to know that unclear wording can cause misinterpretation, confusion on what to provide, and also how much to provide. Making sure to take into account all the aspects of the question or statement in regards to the point of view of the program and the applicant can definitely guarantee less confusion and higher completion rates. For example, she kind of did give an example, but for example, for my program for income, if the form was to state provide all household income, this could be taken in different ways by the applicant and doesn't cover like program specific needs. So for the low income home energy assistance program or LIHEAP, the ideal question would be something like report all earned and unearned income for all household members received within the last 30 days, with perhaps an additional tip stating name, pay frequency, pay dates, and gross must be visible in the document and/or ledger. With this amended statement, not only does it outline the program's specific eligibility requirements for time frame, required information in order to verify a document, and the type of income that is countable, but also it clarifies for the applicant what they should provide and how much they should provide. Which does also lead me to the next point. Having the input of an eligibility specialist and requiring them to test out work before launch can diminish a lot of drawbacks. So, for instance, you can take Code for America reaching out to us, which is, of course, the initial step. The next could be perhaps like a walkthrough of the application or what we do with one application so that designers can experience the process and benefit from visual representation, which can help with better understanding and perhaps also help with obtaining better and or additional ideas that conversations might not highlight. The last step would be having an eligibility specialist test out before launch. And I think this is important because it can locate a lot of bugs, maybe that can be present, and that can avoid a lot of backlogs, mental exhaustion for eligibility specialists, and frustration for applicants. Because if steps 2 and 3 are skipped, per experience of the integrated benefits A to Z, it has shown me that this can lead to higher rework, so reworking applications to fix things that were perhaps missed or misinterpreted by an application, or perhaps things were not translating from the new form to our system, so we had to go back and make sure that things were missed were fixed. It also led to high level reviews. A lot of applicants were putting in requests to fix things, that things weren't getting checked just because of that backlog. It kind of did set us back a lot of months. So they were pretty frustrated with that part of the experience. It also led to more appeals, a lot more calls just because applicants were wondering why it was taking so long, trying to clarify on what exactly it is that they needed because they weren't understanding certain questions. And also, of course, that affected the completion rates, so that did lower that. I would have to say another immense aid for eligibility specialists are resources, or like Sharon stated, cheat sheets. The resources we have include standard of work, or SOWs, and templates, which have helped tremendously with stability and quality in our work. In such a fast-paced and continuously changing environment, stability in communication, weekly meetings, refreshers, SOWs, and templates have really guaranteed higher quality for our work and a smoother adjudication process of the applications, which in turn makes it more transparent process for the applicant when we're communicating with them. Because since they're unaware of just how many changes really do go on behind the scenes, when eligibility specialists and the people involved in what we're working on are on the same page, it really gives them an ease of mind. And that has been what they have told me personally when they hear the same answers and the same explanations from everyone. It just gives them a sense of peace that basically, like, we know what we're doing. But at the end of the day, that is the goal, ensuring the success of the work by those wanting to collaborate with us or eligibility specialists, so that can lead to helping as many people as possible, all while guaranteeing high quality, high completion rates, and reassured applicants. And honestly, I can't thank our supervisors enough for all that they do in order to make sure that we are good and prepared for what we need to do. And a big thank you to Code for America for allowing our voices to be heard on a grander scale. I believe what the start of success looks like. And I'm now going to be handing back things over to Rosa. Thank you.
Thanks, Carla. I'm gonna try again and see if Rosa's audio is gonna come through. So we'll just give it a moment here. Rosa, if you want to test it out. All right. It looks like maybe there's still some tech challenges, which is a natural thing that happens and appropriate for Form Fest in our discussions here. So why don't we turn things over to Rocio to kind of share some of those form design principles she mentioned at the beginning, and then maybe we'll have Rosa's audio by the time we get to Q&A.
Yes, thank you, Sharon. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. Yeah, and so what we wanted to do here, some of this might sound a little bit repetitive, but we want to make sure that we really drill this down on the importance of, some learning lessons that we had, some what we're calling form design principles from eligibility workers. And so just to start, starting with client and caseworker needs, designing something, making changes that reflect something that is going to work for both the client and then also the person who's going to process it down the line. And actually, I'm going to pause there. Rosa, it looked like you were unpaused. Do you want to try really quickly? I saw that you logged back in, just in case you can go next. It looked like you were unmuted in case you want to try to unmute really quickly. Just wanted to try because I know that, again, just in case you can go really quickly.
Yeah, we can circle back during Q&A, I think.
No worries. All right. Well, moving down the design principles, practicing transparent prioritization and sharing roadmaps with dates. And by this, we mean, again, this is coming from eligibility workers. They understand changes are inevitable, especially now. So if there are going to be changes down the line to any forms, applications, whatever it might be, just trying to be upfront and just giving them a heads up on when they can expect that. So they can start preparing for that. 3, ensuring that tech teams have direct lines to eligibility workers and vice versa. Again, going back to the idea that we want to make sure that there's a direct feedback line in that process. So wherever possible, we understand the processes and systems for every state are very different. Trying to loop them into that process for that feedback. Letting eligibility workers determine what are major versus minor changes. And by this, we mean, sometimes we, on the program eligibility side, or when we're vetting the program and policy questions, we make changes that we think might work. Or might be easier for the client. But then when you get to the person who's processing it, given their experience, they know that actually might make it more harder. So just trying to figure out the differences between testing this out in advance to make sure you're aligning on what some people think major versus minor changes. Involving eligibility workers in quality assurance testing, including determining test scenarios, again, putting in their voice in the process throughout. And then phasing rollouts to focus on quality over quantity of new features. So just making sure that, again, we are producing products, forms, whatever it might be, that actually improve the lives of everyone involved. So with that, I think I heard some audio, Rosa. Do you want to go ahead and give it a try?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm so sorry about that. Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you.
No, I mean, I think this happens. We all know in the audience that this happens all the time. So we're doing a live demo here.
Yeah. Thank you. Hello, my name is Rosa, and I am a benefit eligibility specialist senior with the Department of Economic Security's Family Assistance Administration. I have 6 years of experience working with clients to determine eligibility for nutrition, cash, and medical assistance programs. So, with that being said, I would like to share some information about my role. One of my responsibilities is working directly with clients. So I do have having access to client applications enables me to understand required information and effectively address clients' questions and concerns. So, for example, whenever I do have client interactions, they always ask information regarding the application process. What documents do I need to bring? How is my application going to be processed quicker? If I bring all my documents, will I be approved the same day that I am, either interviewed or my application is processed? Some of those questions go with the income. So, like, okay, what income information do I need? Do I need to bring in my pay stubs? What other information do I need to clarify regarding my income? So, having an insight in being able to work with clients and answering those questions is something that I do work with. They also ask, like housing expenses, and just giving them clarification on what information is needed is something that I do normally help clients with. Clients typically mention that the current application we have right now is a little bit confusing. So, being able to understand the application that we currently have to be able to clarify those questions to the client, let them know, hey, this is the information that we need. These are the questions that, you need to answer in order for our application to be processed. Those are just some of the things that I do see clients normally ask. And then, adapting to constant changes. Due to the recent changes, clients are experiencing a greater challenging in accessing their medical, cash, or nutrition assistance. As a result, many of our most vulnerable community members are facing barriers to securing the benefits they need. So some of these changes now require clients to provide their own documents regarding, their income, housing, or the living expenses, which can be difficult for some of those who are already struggling. So, our role is to support and guide clients through this process, ensuring they receive the help that they need. So, to highlight, this new process may cause confusion as there are going to be 5 programs that clients are going to be applying for on the same application. So, I am grateful that I was given the opportunity to review the integrated application process ahead of time with Code for America. This gave me some insight on these new changes that the clients will be facing and what will be expected once the integrated application is rolled out for my program. We're usually, I'm sorry, we're not currently working with the new application. So I feel that having ample amount of training with Code of America, if we could still, continue working with Code for America on this application process, it ensures that, we have better understanding of the application and we're able to provide more feedback or clear guidance to the clients on, which programs need to be applied for. And then maybe they can understand the application process a little bit more clearly. So the last thing I would like to add is training. So training plays a critical role in my success. When I have sufficient time to learn and practice a new process, I am far more effective in applying them with, the clients I'm assisting, or, sometimes I have to assist my coworkers, helping them understand the process or the questions that need to be asked or the information that we need in order to process these applications for our clients. So proper training reduces errors and increases efficiency, and it helps provide higher quality to our clients. So, again, I would like to just add that having additional time to continue working on this new integrated application process for Code with Code for America would be great, which gives us, more of an understanding, and we can be prepared once this rollout comes out.
Thank you so much, Rosa.
Thank
Just
you.
always in awe of your expertise, and Carla, you as well. So much of your thinking is reflected throughout this deck, not just in the examples that you shared. And so, yeah, just so in awe of you, even after all of these months of working together. Well, on that note, I want to make sure we have enough time for a discussion of the questions that we've gotten through the chat. So I'll turn things back over to Rocio to just wrap up our slides, and then, yeah, we'll try to tackle as many questions as we can.
Sounds good. And just please know we did get a few questions, going through them as quick. We'll try to answer as many as possible, so please bear with us. Just to start, someone asked, Elise Cohn, was the application ultimately provided to the applicants in languages other than English? Were the eligibility workers involved in the translations or review of the translations? I can get us started, and Sharon or others, feel free to jump in. So our part of the partnership here, just as a reminder, was for the design aspect. And as part of that work, we did do content design and content and wireframes, and this was only for English and Spanish. I think it'll be up to the state of Arizona if they want to add different languages down the line as they work on implementation. But for now, just wanted to call out that those were our two focuses. And then as far as were eligibility workers involved in the translation and review of the translations, we actually had a separate process that we're really proud of. I know we don't go into specifics today, but we actually transcribed the application. So we had specific transcreation experts on our team that focus on not just plain translation, but also making sure that we're transcreating in a way that is, relative. That relates to the culture of Arizona, the way that they use informal versus formal in Spanish. We actually had a different body of work with program specialists in the state of Arizona who focused on the Spanish content to make sure that we had these Spanish transcreation principles that we followed throughout. So no, the eligibility workers directly themselves did not review the English part, but we did have Arizona program specialist who again, guided the creation of these principles and did some review of certain aspects of the application to make sure it was working for them. And it was, again, relevant to the Arizona context.
Yeah, and to build on that a little bit, so I think it was a couple of months before we did these interviews with eligibility staff. We actually kind of brought an early version of the application to clients as well as community-based organizations that the Department of Economic Security connected us with. And for those kind of different streams of research, we did bring the Spanish version of the application. And so we conducted interviews with clients in Spanish to understand the wording and the kind of the transcreation that Rocio described. And then we worked with some community-based organization that kind of almost exclusively serve Spanish-speaking families and households. And we heard a lot from those assisters about kind of, terminology that can be really tricky, suggested wording that they've used. So in addition to that transcreation process that Rocio described, definitely kind of multiple kind of types and forms and cadences of like feedback and collaboration on the Spanish version. All right.
Great. All right, let me move on to another one that was asked here. Again, we're trying to comb through this as fast as possible. Kara asked, what was your experience like working with our federal partners for approval of the new application? I'm particularly interested in hearing how the approval process went for CMS. How long did it take? Did you have to make any changes based on feedback? I'm interested in any insights you have to work through this process. So Kara, that's a great question. In our piece of the project, we did not get to that point. So I think that could potentially be something that the state of Arizona pursues. So unfortunately, don't have much to say on this piece of it. Sharon, anything else you want to add here? No? All right.
I can pick a question from the list.
Yeah, go
I
for it.
see Melissa's asked, how did you determine in-person training outweighing kind of other types of training or online training? Did you get feedback from eligibility workers, or did they have success with the new application after in-person training versus virtual training was completed? So this was definitely something we heard directly from eligibility workers, and it was based on kind of past rollouts of changes where there were both kind of in-person and virtual training options. And I think probably most of us can relate if we've tried to multitask during the day, that when doing remote training, it can be very tempting. I mean, I am sometimes guilty of this myself, to check email to make sure nothing urgent has come through, or to consult other work that's going on. And so it was really just like that ability to focus and have dedicated time, especially because eligibility workers are often so busy, that kind of suggestion or recommendation came through in our interviews.
Great.
Oh,
Do you want to do? I can just jump in. Someone asked, "Can we see visuals for wireframes you went through together as examples?" We certainly have wireframes. I think we might just ask our Arizona partners if this is something we can share. I don't know if you have anything else to add there, Sharon.
It's definitely a work in progress. So I know we're happy to kind of talk about more of our process and kind of like the form some of our documentation has taken. But yeah, it's definitely still a work in progress, which reminds me of another question, I think related, just to try to group these a little bit, that came through. There was someone who was asking basically how we kind of documented changes or track changes, if I'm paraphrasing accurately. And Rocio, I don't know if you want to answer that. I know you were very critical, played a very critical role in just how we thought about kind of change log, how we documented changes that happened to the application over the course of our work with the Department of Economic Security. Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can start us off. And Mike, I'm interpreting your question as frameworks we use during the design and making changes and streamlining the application. We actually went through this, yeah, like a lot. The fun part of our work is always creating new processes, new templates. And so this definitely evolved throughout. But we used a lot of spreadsheets, Google Docs, spreadsheets. Literally, we went through the exercise of tracking, like, okay, what are all the original questions from both the paper and the digital application currently in existence in Arizona? Then we streamlined, okay, what changes have we made? Where was it like, we had different like scroll bars, like where did we make like a change to the wording, intact, removed, added a new question, and then where specifically did that come from the existing to like what we were proposing as a change. So lots of very concrete or very inline tracking happening. And in addition to that, not just from like the overall text of the changes we were proposing for the new design, but we also had a lot of policy conversations with Arizona stakeholders. And so as we had a lot of policy discussions. And so we had Google Docs representing like our policy research, what we were proposing, alignment with Arizona stakeholders. We had more spreadsheets tracking line by line. So I think spreadsheets and Google Sheets were definitely the top trackers that we used in order to communicate the changes to Arizona, and just to make sure that they had that we could offer the best documentation possible. I will stop there just for the sake of time. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take one more quick question, and then we want to wrap up to make sure that everyone has a chance for a breather before the next session. Someone posted the anonymous question of kind of what was the specific benefit of using ChatGPT. And so for here, exactly right. It was the idea of like, how do we take all this like Figma design documentation we have to create something really simple that would kind of reflect just the kind of the wording of the questions. And so we didn't even use ChatGPT. I mean, we'll do this in other projects and use AI-assisted tools. We didn't use it to create any prototypes. They were just those Google Docs that we showed. We wanted something to be easy to send, something easy to open. And so, kind of that was our very basic use in this case of ChatGPT. So on that note, we just want to leave you with these three parting thoughts. Rosie, if you want to take us home here and wrap us up.
Yes, and just really quickly, Aurel, someone asked about the resource hub. If you could please link that directly into the chat so folks know where to access these slides after. And if there's any way to answer these after, please let us know, Aurel. We got a ton of questions, guys, so sorry if we didn't get to all of them. But just to wrap us up, final thoughts. If there is nothing else that you take away from us, please One, ask frontline staff for feedback early as possible. Loop them in, but as early as possible, ideal. Communicate changes in timely and organized ways. Again, they're going through a lot, especially now. So anything you can do to work on communication would be greatly appreciated. Hands-on practice. Let them go through the applications, let them give their feedback, and just any practice is greatly appreciated. So sorry we had to resume, but really appreciate the interest. Again, we got so many questions we wish we could answer right now. Thank you so much. And thank you, Rosa and Carla, for joining us today.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of FormFest.
Thank you.
All right.